John, we are co-founders of the Design Sprint Academy. We are a consultancy firm dedicated to help teams and organizations define and solve their biggest challenges throughout problem framing and design sprints. Now, for the past 5 years, we've been working with the world's biggest brands and help them build and scale their internal innovation capabilities with our training programs and workshop facilitation. And today we're so excited to share with you some more details and more information about how Turner Construction is using problem framing and design sprints in their innovation process. And for that, we have here with us Jennifer Downey. Now, she's the Director of Innovation at Turner Construction, and she plays a key role in guiding overall strategy and leading the efforts on the company's Innovation Summit and Innovation Challenge programs. And today she'll be sharing more about nurturing bottom-up innovation while also aligning employees' ideas with the overall business goals. And I think this is going to be an interesting discussion, interesting topic that we are all curious to learn more about. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And I think we should start with a quick introduction and maybe let Jen tell us more about herself, and especially maybe you can tell us more and describe your role at Turner. What does that role mean and what are your goals in that role?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody, and thanks, John and Dana, for having me today. I'm really excited to spend the next hour chatting about design sprints and innovation and all of those kinds of things. I think you read a little bit of my bio, but in a nutshell, we sort of describe that what our role is for innovation at Turner is about identifying and prioritizing opportunities and then bringing those ideas to implementation. And the overall goal is really focused around improving the lives of our Turner staff, the lives of our trade partners, our design partners, and our owners. And my job is really focused around helping people think differently and solving important problems.
It's a tough job. I can't imagine that is an easy job that you have there. And you've been doing this for a while. For how many years?
So officially, it's about 3 or 4 years, but unofficially, I think we've been doing this for a long time. I've been at Turner for 11 years, and I come from an architectural background before that. And it's sort of that combination of backgrounds and skill sets that from my design background, where that's the primary focus of design, right? It's about identifying those the problems, and in those cases, implementing a design solution, but this is just a slightly different application of the same skill set.
In the end, is in a way problem solving, but looking at it through different lenses. Now, we've met when?
Last December, I think. I was checking. Last December, wasn't it?
Like a very short time, and since then we've learned a lot about what you're doing at Turner, and the topic for today is also to discover more about the Innovation Challenge program that you run, and maybe you can give us some more insights into what it is and what's the goal of that program.
Sure. So the Innovation Challenge is just one aspect of our overall innovation approach at Turner. But it's always one that's focused on this idea of purposeful innovation. So we talk a lot about that there are lots of different things that we could focus on, but through the Innovation Challenge and through other programs at Turner, we're really trying to figure out how we identify and focus on those key business opportunities. And so the Innovation Challenge is a structured program that we use. It's an internal ideation and development program. And the cycle starts with an ideation phase. We have an open call for ideas that are around structured topic areas. And that typically lasts about a month. And then from those ideas, we go into the development phase. And that currently consists of 2 key workshop elements. We start with a problem framing workshop, and then move into our design sprint workshops. And from there, we have several working groups that come out of each innovation topic area that continue to carry those forward as we move through development and implementation.
So in the first phase, when you have this open call for ideas, who usually submits those ideas? Where are those ideas coming from?
So it comes from all across the board, different employees from different levels of experience, from our entry-level employees that are a few years out of college, all the way to people that have 15, 20, maybe even 25 or 30 years of experience. But it's always people that are passionate about improvement and innovation, and really that are looking for those opportunities within their own areas of work and want to be able to share that with other people.
I have a question here, and I think I know the answer, but over the years, we've been working, or we've been part of similar processes. And of course, we've also heard of other organizations doing similar stuff, where there's an open call, employees submit lots of different ideas, but then how do you select them? How do you carry them forward? Because a lot of these ideas end nowhere. So.
Yeah, and so that's a really good question, and that's actually how the Innovation Challenge program developed. Was we had a previous program, an award for innovation program, where people would submit ideas, they were evaluated, they got cash prizes, and the challenge with that was exactly what you described, that there was a great frustration that there wasn't a mechanism to take something from an idea to scale it within the organization, because that's a long process with lots of hard work and lots of stakeholders and things like that. So the challenge does start with the ideation phase, but as we move into that development phase, we're really bringing together these groups of thought leaders who are focused around solving specific problems together. And so it's not about, my individual idea going in, or the individual idea of the person that submitted. It's really becomes a group effort of them solving this problem together. So it's our idea, not my idea. And because we're able to leverage sort of a wide variety of knowledge areas, of backgrounds and experiences and all of that, right? We're bringing together a really diverse cross-section of individuals to participate in these different workshops, that helps us identify specific areas to focus on, and then work on that as a group, and then leverage other key resources and stakeholders within the organization as we go through those next phases. Another key part of this, I think, is truthfully that the innovation department stays involved in the whole process, that we really do manage these as innovation projects, and setting deliverables and putting together schedules and all of that process to keep moving each of those steps forward, because it's so easy for it to sort of flip to the side and not necessarily go anywhere. But by keeping that, having the process to keep the momentum going.
So we have here a question that because you mentioned your development phase. Oh, after you have all of these ideas, you move into a development phase where you have problem framing and design sprints. And Mariana is asking in the chat window, ideation and problem framing are not the same, or how are they related? So what's your take on that, Jen?
So problem framing is a new element to our Innovation Challenge process that we've just incorporated into this latest cycle. And the goal of that is to really focus in on a couple of key problem areas or opportunity areas within the organization. So the ideas themselves are coming from, as I mentioned, a wide variety of individuals across the company. And they're submitting, they can submit from an idea to an implemented idea. So they can have an idea and they're explaining what they think it might do, or they can submit something that they've already put into practice. But these are always based on sort of whatever their individual experiences are, or, they're working in small groups and things like that. And the problem framing workshops are an opportunity for us to bring focus around that. And back to that idea of purposeful innovation, right? That we could tackle any of these things, but where do we start? What's the most important things for us to focus our attention on? And so the problem framing workshops are 6 to 8 people within the organization that we've identified that are coming from, again, a diverse cross-section of backgrounds, geography, experience, all of that. But we're really targeting people that are coming in at a department head level or like project executive level. So the leadership of our projects. And we found that level of experience is really helpful because they have both a broad knowledge of the business. They've usually worked in a number of roles across the organization. They've seen lots and lots of different processes and understand what those are. But they also are still working at a point in their careers where they're very closely involved in the day-to-day execution of things. They're not necessarily doing the tasks, but they're working really closely with the people who are. And so having that sort of combination of experience helps them have the knowledge that when we go through the problem framing process, that they can help us really pinpoint what those opportunities are to focus on.
Is it fair to say then that through problem framing, you make sure that you align employees' ideas with the overall business goals and objectives, so that if you're finding a solution through the innovation process, then you have some certainty that it gets to implementation because it's so aligned with what you're trying to do as a business?
So it is looking for those ideas that are aligned with the problems, but also then finding people that are solving other similar things that we can also leverage their experience. Yes. So it's almost never a direct one-to-one of we take this one idea and it goes to implementation. It's more of a larger group collective effort. And often someone is starting to solve that problem within their area, but then how do we leverage other people's experience and expertise to really build upon that?
Which is why you said it's no longer one's idea, it becomes our idea at the end of this problem framing process. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. We do have one question for Annika here, but I think we're going to address it, Annika, a little bit later in our conversation today. It's in-person versus virtual, Jen. So
yeah, we were just talking about that.
We were just talking about that. So absolutely. Good.
So staying back at the problem framing workshop, we've been together with you for one of those workshops and you've done multiple afterwards. Maybe you can bring some light into what happens inside the type of problem framing workshop.
So these are structured as a 3-part workshop process. And in the first workshop, we're really looking at, I think, that opportunity landscape. So starting with a process map that we've generated ahead of time. So we're not spending time on that during the workshop itself. We go through an exercise of identifying desired outcomes at each of the phases. And from that, we're doing an evaluation of current performance versus desired performance. And, when we're looking at this across this entire vast opportunity landscape, right? And as you guys saw, we have a lot of processes, and it covers a lot of time during the project. So there's lots of different things that we're covering in this time, but it starts to really quickly provide a framework that the group can analyze and identify those gaps, because as we know, gaps often equate to opportunities, right? And often bigger gaps may start to point us in the direction of where we want to focus. So as a group, But it's not just numbers based, right? It's not that there's lots of evaluation that's important to happen from all these experts that we're bringing together to start to look at those different business values along the value stream. So from our first workshop, we identify 3 key opportunity areas to work within. And then the second workshop is really focused on identifying that problem statement. So going through a process of identifying, again, gaps and barriers and challenges and problems in the process, and then going through that structured format of developing the problem statement for each of those opportunity areas. And then because this is important to our innovation challenge process, the third workshop is taking a little bit of a step back and looking at the landscape of ideas that were submitted through the innovation challenge ideation process. So we're receiving typically hundreds of ideas within each category, which is a lot to evaluate. And so we're using a process to start that evaluation process with these experts from across the company and with our topic sponsors as well. I have not mentioned that one of the important things that we've seen with our innovation challenge is that we have 2 executive sponsors for each topic area. And they're really critical along the way of not only providing, again, their own knowledge and experience and feedback, but they provide a really important connection back to the leadership across the organization, as well as facilitating resources and connections and things like that along the way. So they're sort of our liaison throughout the whole process to help with anything that we need in the process. So back into problem framing. Again, in that third workshop, when we're going through and evaluating the ideas and the thought leaders behind those ideas, trying to understand where there are synergies with the different problem framing areas, but also where people are exhibiting, just good problem solving skills and that they're tackling things in a unique way or a clever way or thinking about things differently. And so it's sort of that combination that starts to lay the framework for the selection of the thought leaders that we bring together in the design sprint workshop, which then follows the problem framing workshop. So there's lots that happens in those 3 workshops.
It is
each of them 3 hours, so it's not a lifetime, but still.
Yeah, you would say that's what you see on the surface, how much work you put in order to prepare all the assets and all the ideas to put them in the right shape and form so that people can digest them in 3 hours per se. So,
well, and actually, Donna, that's a really good point, because I think one of the things that we're always, we've talked to you guys about it and we're always struggling with is how do you really maximize the time that you have with the people that you're bringing in for these different workshops? Because everybody's time is very precious and we want to leverage every single minute that we're together. So when we look at the agenda and we're trying to figure out what's happening and what we can prepare ahead of time so that the information is there and ready, right? That there aren't steps that could be done ahead of time instead of when everybody's together, so that we can really, really maximize that time that those groups are there.
Especially when you're looking at simple things like building a stadium or an airport. So.
Easy project.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, this becomes very, very important.
But if you are to think back of the problem framing workshops you've run, what would you say that are your key lessons learned, like from moving from one to another?
So I was thinking about this the other day, and I think there's both sort of the facilitation side of it, as well as the just technical execution side of the workshops. Again, one of the pieces that is a lesson learned around that is how to make sure that we're maximizing time. I mean, we really look at things all the way down to when breaks happen and how long they are and what we're doing during the breaks to make sure that we're queuing things up for for the next part of the session. Sometimes if these are virtual sessions, there's work that we're doing behind the scenes of tallying things up and getting materials ready and making sure that when everybody returns from the break that things are ready to go and keep moving. I think each workshop group has a bit of a different dynamic in terms of the different people and trying to understand how to work through that, making sure that we're providing opportunities for each person to be heard along the way, but also providing opportunities to really pull the information from each of the individuals if maybe they're a little bit uncertain about the process or this is new to them, right? That we're getting that information out of them. I had another one and now I don't remember what it was, but that was those were a couple of them.
We have until Dana is asking the next question. We have one here that's related to the 3 workshops within problem framing. Eugenia is asking, are different people involved in the 3 workshops? Jen, or is
if we think of problem framing as one entity, a 3 workshop session, that's one group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a second set of people that are involved in the design sprint workshops. So each of these workshops are multiple days, multiple sessions, but they form sort of a cohesive thing. So there's one group for problem framing, one group for design sprint.
And if I may add to problem framing, you have one group going through all of the 3 workshops because they build on top of each other. Also, one advantage that you have having 3 workshops is that after the first session or the second session, you can always take into consideration what you learned and kind of adjust the next ones. And I think we did that with the first one that we ran with you. Like we took the learning from the first sessions and we were able to pivot a little bit and tweak things around because it made more sense.
Well, and even, I mean, to that matter, that's another good lesson learned. And I think that's both in problem framing and design sprints is having, understanding the process, but also providing an opportunity for things, if you need to have a little bit of a diversion and have a conversation, that if it's important to the workshop, how you have the flexibility to do that, that you're not so tightly keeping to the schedule that that you're not providing those opportunities for sort of those unexpected conversations that can be so beneficial. But then in the back of your mind, being able to make adjustments to the rest of the schedule so that you're still able to meet the objectives of the session, but have that flexibility within it. So both within the individual workshops themselves, and then what you were describing in terms of, if something goes in a certain way in the first workshop, that you're then able to make adjustments in the subsequent workshops as well.
Right.
So
we have a couple of questions here.
Maybe we can ask them in regards to problem framing, and then we can talk a little bit more about design sprints.
Which one do we have?
There was something about sponsors.
Yeah, Gilda is asking, how do you find the topic sponsor that you bring into your innovation process? What's typically their role throughout the innovation challenge process?
Okay, so the topic sponsors themselves are from senior leadership. So this year, they're largely general managers. They're officers of the company typically. So we're looking at people who are coming from different geographic areas, and they don't necessarily need a deep technical knowledge in the area that we might be approaching. Because when we do our innovation challenge, we're also pairing, our topic areas are pairing up both sort of a technology area of focus with a business need area of focus. So something like automation and business process automation, and then pairing that to the business needs that go along with it. And so our topic sponsors don't need to be experts in the topic of business process automation, which is a good thing. And but that they're that business expert of it, and then we're able to give them these different opportunities to engage with the group along the way. So the actual selection process is just identifying who the people are within the organization and then trying to pair them up. We want to have different sponsors from year to year, just to have different levels of engagement, understanding other things that they might be working on that align with these different topic areas. We also consult with our other senior leadership within the company. So we're often given suggestions of people to be involved in the process. So there's a number of criteria that come into play, and then their engagement along the way. They're integrally involved in the problem framing process. We have them join as part of the design sprint workshop, and then they become more of an advisory and resource capability going forward. So just maintaining that connection, keep making sure that we're keeping on track, that we're not diverting from, what those important business goals were as we go through the remainder of the process.
Is that like in a design sprint, we have a different group that is basically working on solving the problem or coming up with ideas for that specific problem. And when it comes to problem solvers, how do you recruit them, or who do you recruit for that?
So the people who are moving into our solution space in our design sprint workshop are largely coming from our innovation challenge ideation submission process. So it's one way for people to raise their hand and say that they're interested in innovation and solving these types of problems. Those are typically people who are demonstrating the skill sets that we're looking for, both personality skill sets and technical skill sets, when we move into the design sprint phase. So as we look at what they've submitted and how they've approached the individual problem solving in their idea submissions, that helps us build a diverse group of participants for the design sprint process.
On one side, it's like it matters, right, the critical thinking, but also to have this initiative and drive and wanting to do something. Because if it comes just, you have to be here, you have to now come up with ideas and innovate, but it's like not in your mindset or in your system, it's very hard to drive results that way.
Well, and innovation is lots of fun, but it's also a lot of work. Like there's a lot of work that has to happen behind the scenes to really move something forward. And we want people to be involved that have that passion and the drive to continue with it and stick with, the different processes as we move towards that implementation phase.
Talking about design sprints and this ideation process, you told us before that you're not following the exact design sprint formula, that you have an adaptation. Maybe you can walk us through that process also.
Sure. So what we're really doing is more of an opportunity sprint than a design sprint. So it still follows the same primary steps along the way. So we're going through, our version is understand, define, sketch, prototype, validate. And so I think I skipped one. Decide, prototype, validate. And we're doing a small selection of exercises within those. So it's still the same intent along the way, but the focus is a little bit further back. So when we look at more traditional design sprints, especially in more of the software space, those I think tend to be more specifically focused around what's being solved. Whereas, and this is why we really call it more of an opportunity sprint than a design sprint, is we're kind of at a step back from that. We're trying to figure out what those solutions might look like that you can then dive into in greater detail later. So it's, it's like kind of one layer removed, but because of that, they're also a little bit shorter. Still following the same process, but it's 2 days instead of a week.
Can I ask you, speaking of design sprints, Jen, what do you think, because you said you added problem framing to your innovation process only this year. What is the difference between running a design sprint with and without problem framing?
So it's been an interesting experience watching that difference. I think the biggest difference is just the focus. So when we've conducted the design sprints previously, we've had a sort of a rougher definition that we went going in, but because of that, the solutions that people were coming up with through the process were a really wide variety of options. We didn't necessarily have a strong way to evaluate what to narrow our focus to. And so by having the problem framing, it gives us a framework that we can use to make those design sprints more focused.
Good, thank you. Do you have any questions, or should I take some questions because like there's like some questions piling up here, Jen, and I want to ask them. We have one from Debbie, and I think she's maybe facing a similar problem, but she's asking, what tips do you have for synthesizing all of the great info you receive from the participants and the employees? I'm assuming during these workshops, during the idea submissions, there's like a lot of great stuff they submit.
So we go through multiple review cycles and evaluation cycles and things like that. So a lot of times we're looking for patterns in submissions or different ways to categorize things. And so we actually moved through different systems to do that. So, doing a pass with one group in one format, and then a different pass with the same submissions. We're not sort of reducing the ones that we're going through, but trying to evaluate them in a different way and with different criteria, so that we're, because again, it's not that traditional like selecting winners per se, right? It's about looking at what that cohesive team is going to look like when we come together in the design sprint. So it's applying lots of different criteria to be able to filter and group and that sort of process. It's probably slightly less scientific of an answer than people are looking for, but I think it is more of that fluid process of identifying what all those different criteria are and looking at what those different combinations look like.
Short, it depends, right? It depends on what you're receiving and how you decide to combine based on the decisions made in the problem framing beforehand.
I like these questions from Malcolm. It sounds like you have an innovation culture at Turner. Was there specific activities that the leadership did to encourage the culture? And also, could you describe how you obtain buy-in initially? And I think this is a question everyone wants, like, how do you get the buy-in to do these kind of things?
So I think in sort of in the description that you put together of the webinar, the top down and bottom up, I actually think that describes the culture really well. So there's a strong emphasis from leadership all the way from our CEO of wanting people to tackle problems and innovate and look for different opportunities and solve those everyday problems in their lives, as well as, starting to look at what those bigger opportunities could be. And I think we just also, from a culture perspective, a large portion of the people who work here are just sort of inherently motivated to, when they see a problem, that they want to tackle it and try to find a better way to do something. And whether it's technology-based or process-based or, what the different aspects are, that they have that, a lot of people also just have that intrinsic drive that motivates them to do that. And then our goal as the innovation department is to kind of connect all those pieces together, because we want to provide opportunities where we can leverage people's enthusiasms and their skill sets and help both to help them solve the problems that they're solving, but also help them get involved in these different efforts that have the opportunity to really scale beyond a project or a business unit, but scale to the size of the organization.
I could weigh in here. I might not be right, but I think culture is something that you create, and just looking at your innovation process, because we also have heard of innovation theater so much, but what I'm seeing that what you're doing, you have a purpose. I mean, innovation is always connected to your business goals. You're not only looking for doing some workshops, but you have everything. I think you said at the beginning of the call, you have a process that takes things from idea to the implementation phase, and it's a very clear process that gets you there. And it's also something that you manage. That's why you have an innovation team, and you're like you said, there's a lot of work. You need to do all of the work behind the scenes. And I think that just like putting all of these things together could create a culture of innovation, because you have the resources, you have the purpose, you have the process, and you have the people driving it.
That was a very good summary, John.
Oh.
That's exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened. I was just taking note of what you were saying. Good. What else do we have here? One question from Benno. I think you touched upon this, but I'm just going to ask it. How are problems identified within your organization? I think it starts with the idea submissions, and then problem framing, but I'll let you.
Yeah, so that's one way. Sort of the innovation challenge is one opportunity to do that. We're also working with other groups and people within the organization to go through similar kinds of opportunities using kind of a variety of innovation methodologies as we tackle different problem opportunities. Sometimes people will bring things directly to us. I mean, there's lots of different ways that those ideas can come up, and the innovation challenge is really just one of them.
This one's very interesting. And I think, again, many organizations struggle here because it's about the short-term gain versus the long-term strategy. So the question is, very often short-term business goals are not aligned with innovation goals. How do you deal with the discrepancy within the company?
So when we think about innovation, it really is from that kind of portfolio view, right? What are the short-term things? What are the midterm things and the long-term things? And that also ties really closely to kind of the spectrum of technology development and what's available now, what's coming in the next 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and how do we set up things now that can start to provide immediate benefit, but that also are looking at what those next things are that are coming and sort of laying the foundations and the framework for them, so that as those technologies advance, that we're ready for them, that we're not jumping in and starting to try learning something as it's becoming ready for the market. We're preparing for each of those incremental steps. And I think that ties to business goals as well, that, we want to work on something that has tangible benefit today, because I think that those sort of micro steps can lead us towards what those bigger business goals are in the future, that we want to start somewhere.
Having the exec sponsors and also the leadership in your problem framings as part of the process, make sure that innovation is still connected to your business goals.
Yes.
Yes, I think we have a good question here. Also, because we tackled a little bit the workshops that you do, problem framing, design sprints, virtual or in person. How are they done right now, and what do you think that works best?
So in the past, they were always in person, because that was the way we did them, right? And there's lots of benefits to being in person, but there's also challenges from a scheduling perspective and things like that. If we have people traveling from all over the country to be in person in workshops, they're offline for close to a week in a lot of cases. And that can just be really, really hard to manage all the rest of their responsibilities. And so with COVID, obviously we switched to completely virtual sessions, just out of necessity. But I think part of the process was really understanding, it wasn't a direct translation of, we did this in person, now let's do the exact same thing virtually. It's trying to understand what the goal and the benefit was of each of the different things we were doing so that we could come up with the way that it translated into a virtual environment. And I think what we found is that the majority of what we're doing actually translates really well to virtually. We can have engagements with people from across the country or across the world, and it feels very similar to what you'd be doing in real life. And so the great thing about that is it really broadens the reach of the people that we're able to engage with, where people who wouldn't have been able to take that time in the past because of schedule constraints can now participate, which is a really, really wonderful thing. That said, is it the same? No, it's not exactly the same. I think the thing that we struggle with the most is trying to figure out how to incorporate that networking component, the sort of on the side conversations that happen during breaks and at lunchtime, and those relationships that are formed and the conversations that people have outside of the framework of the workshops. And we're still trying to figure that out. I mean, we had a in-person session recently, and it was really nice to see everybody and to be able to have those kinds of conversations. So I think going forward, though, what we want to continue to do is that it's understanding what works well in what formats and how we can really maximize the time that we have together, whether it's virtual or in person, to get the most done in that amount of time.
Can I ask one more question from the group? With problem framing opportunity mapping being tied to business goals, does the innovation challenge ever look to figure out opportunities for disruption, like technologies, operational processes?
Currently, no. So the innovation challenge, when we think about that spectrum of innovation, is more focused on the core business side of innovation. We have other places that we engage to move towards that emergent or transformative disruptive innovation. That this is sort of one of our areas along that core business side of the spectrum.
Right. I'm not sure if you asked about the Innovation Challenge program, but are you running this once per year, or is like multiple sessions that you do, Jen?
So, things are never as simple as that.
Because the reason of my question is like, what kind of cadence do you need to have so it's meaningful, so you can?
Yeah. So we're always adjusting. One of the things we learned in the first cycle was that we tried to tackle too many topic areas and at one time. So in the first innovation challenge, we had 5 topic areas. And from each of those topic areas, we had typically in the neighborhood of 3 working groups that came out of that. So all of a sudden, we're trying to manage somewhere between 12 and 15 working groups at the same time, which was a lot. And we did have some, but the other piece of that, I guess, that's important is we know that not every single one of these working groups is going to move into implementation. Just like almost anything in innovation, sometimes there are things that we stop. And it's important not to be so tied. We talk about loving the problem and not the solution. It's not about the solution, right? The solution is just the means to try to solve the problem. And so if we identify along the way that there's another group that's working on something really similar and we merge the efforts, or that as we look at sort of the landscape within the company that it's not the time, then we'll stop, right? Like, and we're always doing that check that it's not just because we had this idea, we're going to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing to get it to implementation. Like if it turns out that that's not what the company needs right now, then we won't continue it forward. But having said that, 5 topic areas was too many to do at the same time. So in this current version, we have 3 to be able to have a more frequent innovation cycle. And in the current version, we have 1 ideation cycle that covers all 3 topic areas. And then from that, we begin all the workshop phases. And what we'd like to move to is a more continuous sort of smaller cycle where you cover 1 topic per innovation challenge ideation cycle. And then that moves into the workshop phases. And then you get a staggered sort of cadence instead of that sort of stacking where everything is starting at the same time. And then they're kind of wrapping up as the process concludes. So the goal is that we want to be wrapping up the previous cycle in order to begin the next. So it's trying to figure out what that cadence is to be able to support that.
It's important that you have, you're going to have a cadence, and having a cadence is important to innovation. You also mentioned your design sprint are not by the book, and they're more like opportunity sprint. And this is, I'm linking to one of the questions I see here in the chat is how do you end up validating these ideas, these solutions? We started talking about it just before the webinar started, so maybe.
So when we get to the end of the workshop, because the prototype is more of an approach prototype or that opportunity prototype, that the validate stage often comes right after the workshop. It's engaging with a variety of groups within the organization, trying to take a step back and do a bit of that current state analysis and understand what things are happening, who's important to get involved. And then that way, as we move forward, that we're not just sort of jumping into something without understanding how it fits into the landscape of the other things that are happening within the company.
To me, it sounds like a lot of work and a lot of decisions you need to make, and sometimes very tough decision. And I was wondering, like, even to manage all those challenges and the workshops, how big is a team that is doing that or is in charge or has governance over this process?
So it's a small team. There are, I think, 6 of us in total, but from an innovation challenge perspective, we really have myself as well as 2 other people that get involved in that. At some point, I'll step back from the process and continue to stay involved, but I'm not in, every single meeting and all of that kind of stuff. Because what it really comes down to is we're not the ones executing the process, right? It is that team that's coming together from across the company that are these innovators that are passionate about driving change and their continued involvement going forward, as well as other resources that we might bring in to be able to, if you run into challenges in terms of skill sets, of capacity or of capability within the team, that we can leverage other people to help, keep driving it forward. But it's not that you take an innovation and you hand it off to the innovation department and we go do it for you, that it's that continued involvement from the rest of the group as well.
You're facilitating the whole process.
Enabling more.
Yes.
Yes.
Fly, free and do your... and talking about that, if someone is at the beginning of this journey where you are right now and trying to build this culture and trying to create those opportunities for people to come together and come up with new ideas, what are some advice or tips you would give them since they're at the beginning of their journey?
Well, I think one of the big things is just education and awareness. One of the other programs we have at Turner, we have 2 big things with our Innovation Summit, which is an annual internal event for innovation enthusiasts, where we bring together speakers from Turner within the industry and then outside as well. And it's It's really meant to be a learning opportunity and an inspirational event. And then we also have what we call Turner Innovation Town Hall Tuesdays, which are sort of like little mini summits that happen bi-monthly. They're just an hour long each, but they're focused around these similar topics. And in those cases, we're pairing Turner speakers who are sharing what they're doing with an industry leader who's able to give sort of a bigger picture view of where a trend might be heading. And so these are opportunities both to educate the people at Turner about different things they might leverage as they're working on solving their own problems, but also, what's coming, what trends are occurring that we see that are going to be sort of influencing those next steps. And these are great ways because we have opportunities to engage with a really wide variety of staff and start to get them involved in the process. Because I think that's the idea, right? Is how can we provide opportunities to engage in different ways and start to foster that environment of innovation within the company.
Then I have a somewhat similar question, maybe quite almost the same question as Dana, maybe a bit more practical. But I'm getting, not me, someone is getting, I'm still doing what I'm doing. Someone's getting a job, director of innovation, head of innovation in a large organization. They're the only person there. What's the first thing they should do? And then maybe the second.
Well, I guess panic isn't the option. I think it's about talking to people that some of the, if you're trying to figure out where to focus, one of the best ways to do it is to talk to different people within the organization and try to understand where their pain points and their challenges are and what those critical opportunities might be to start narrowing your focus. But you have to talk to people and understand what their needs really are.
Good. I said just one, not the entire list, because I have, if you don't mind, we have a couple of other questions from here that I just want to ask. One coming from Danielle. After handing over innovation to implementation, does it ever come back? Is optimization part of your work? And if so, is there a process for it?
So that's we're still sort of working out exactly what that looks like. Our goal is to stay involved, because often, it's not just that there's this thing and it stands on its own and continues on, that it's that something starts and then you continue to build upon it as you lead towards those bigger picture steps. So, our goal is not to be controlling the process all the way through, but our goal is to stay involved to some extent. And if it does, sometimes things are at a point where they're stable and they can continue to be optimized and improved by the business owner within, or the business process owner within Turner. But we do stay involved in some aspect in a lot of things. Not everything, but a lot of things.
All right, do you have other questions that you want to ask?
I think somewhat related to my previous question, what you do as a director of innovation. We have Benno here asking, what are the biggest challenges for you as an innovation director during the implementation phase? Also, if you're looking at your recent innovation, I
think implementation is actually the hardest stage, right? That just like anything, that change is difficult, that, in order to implement change, if it's changing an existing process, that you need to show a pretty significant improvement for people to make that step and have that change. I mean, I think one of the other pieces is that we're always trying to look for opportunities to make things easier, not adding another process in. And so that does help, but there's lots and lots and lots of communication, really trying to understand within the organization who are the important people to have involved and what steps for the rollout. We're always going to pilot to make sure that we're really working out any of the bugs along the way, that we're not making something available that's not ready. But also, we don't typically mandate that these are just things that are available to people and to projects and offices that we hope will make a difference in their working processes. But we're not saying that it's something that they have to use. And again, just always evaluating it. Is it providing value? Is there a change that needs to be made? And, doing that continuous feedback loop.
Thank you so much.
And I think that's like
Jen.
a great ending to this talk, like all those three elements. It is providing value. Is it the change that is worth doing? Like are exactly related to our topic, doing innovation with purpose. So thank you so much, Jen, for all your input and insights today. I think they were like amazing and spot on. And I hope we managed to answer most of the questions that we've got from our audience. And that being said, we really appreciate you being here with us, and also